Here's a GRE algebra question. Let's take a look. For most of the first half of the 19th century, science at the university was in a blank state, despite the presence of numerous luminaries. All right, so as always, we want to ignore these words first and just focus on the logic of the sentence to make sure we understand it. And one very, very important part of the logic of the sentence is transition words. Do you see any transition words in here? I'm looking at this one. Despite. What kind of transition word is that? Well, it's a contradictory transition word. So if we understand this part of the sentence, we can kind of reverse engineer the part that we're missing. So for most of the first half of the 19th century, science at the university was in some sort of state, good, bad, funny, ridiculous, musical, I don't know. Despite, this is going to tell us what we're missing, despite the presence of numerous luminaries. Now, maybe you know what that word means, maybe you don't. But I'll just ask you this. Does that sound like a good word or a bad word? Luminaries. Well, my guess is that you probably said it sounds like a good word. And there's some logic to that. Luminosity, illumination. It has to do with light, right? So if I'm talking about a luminary or luminaries, those are very, very bright people. Now, I realize you may not know the definition of that word, but the mere fact that you can identify that it is a good word, which it is, tells us that this needs to be a negative word, right? Scintillating, I'll leave that in there. Pathetic, well, that's a pretty bad word, right? Especially if we're contrasting it with how robust and bright the thinkers are at this university, right? Controversial, tempting, but is controversial necessarily a bad thing, right? Controversial just means that there are multiple opinions about it. It doesn't have to be good or bad. Something can be controversial without being negative necessarily, right? Incendiary, that has to do with lighting things on fire, right? Or if we're talking about like rhetoric and speech, that's like a very, very strong, aggressive speech, not what we're talking about. Voracious, again, maybe I don't know what that means, and maybe I don't know what scintillating means, but pathetic works really well here, right? And that is the correct answer.